All right. Well, here we are. TapRm is here with Athletic Brewing Company, represented by project manager Dermot Woods, which we're so excited to talk with you. We love Athletic here at TapRoom, and we're like so excited for other people to get to know the brand. I mean, I'm sure many of them do, but thank you so much for joining us to talk about the brand.
Thanks very much. Yeah, really excited to be on. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and get right into it because we've got a lot to talk about. But before we get, so obviously the big topic is non-alcoholic beer. But let's just talk a little bit about Athletic Brewing Company in particular. I think it would just be fun to get to sort of know Athletic's like origin story and just sort of really how it came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So it all started back in, before we were founded in 2017 with our co-founder, Bill Shufelt. Um, he decided that alcohol was no longer, jiving with his pursuit of a healthier lifestyle. So he still wanted to enjoy a good beer, just without the alcohol. And he was faced with, on nights out, kind of non-inspiring, non-alcoholic options in front of him. So he kind of went down this path of creating a great tasting craft non-alcoholic beer that maybe didn't exist. So as you can imagine, that was a heavy lift with a lot of hurdles. So he faced a challenge there initially in the conception and getting brewers to kind of take his idea, this idea of craft non-alcoholic, seriously. But thankfully, he met with John Walker, who was an award-winning brewer out in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and he was very excited by the challenge that was presented of brewing this craft non-alcoholic beer, and uh, got up and moved out east to Stratford, Connecticut, and from there they started brewing hundreds of test batches and kind of grew from there. Rest is history, as they say.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we are actually going to get into a little bit of that history, because one of I think the really exciting things about Athletic is that it really came along and created this explosion in the non-alcoholic beer market. It blazed this trail for other brands that they would eventually come along and follow. Non-alcoholic beer, as you mentioned, has been around forever, but it was kind of like limited to like these really big brands and it sort of tasted like an afterthought. I don't think that people looking for that really felt like considered in their options, if that makes sense. So, I mean, why was it so important for Athletic to change that? And really, frankly, like, how did the team know that they could? Like, if no one had really done a good non alcoholic IPA before, like, how did Athletic know that they were going to be able to crack that?
Yeah, that again kind of ties to Bill's story a little. The options that he had on that night out, they were pretty outdated, or just not available, or if they were, it was that, as they say, the dusty bottle in the back of the fridge that was presented. So, um, non-alc as a category hasn't really changed, or hadn't really changed or shifted direction at all in probably 25, 30 years. So Bill and John, they really wanted to rise to the occasion and create a craft offering, fully fermented, great tasting beer, huge variety of styles, and just happened to be non-alcoholic. So the mantra, that I've grown up with here and always was and always will be, like, if it doesn't taste good, like, don't put it out. And believe me, we've had our ones that we've thrown out. So they really, in the beginning and ever since, Bill and John, they really took their time to really perfect the process before going to market. And that's obviously been a huge backbone to our overall success.
So I think you kind of addressed this already. But do you want to maybe address like sort of personally your own personal beliefs on this? Because I kind of wanted to talk about the importance of having such a range of options in non-alcoholic craft beer. So first, from your perspective, and then why it's important to consumers. So do you just want to talk a little bit about why you think it's so important to have like a full range of options for people seeking non-alcoholic beer?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely answer from a personal standpoint. I quit alcohol, I think somewhere north of 5 years ago. It was kind of at a similar to Bill, a time in my life when I was considering long-term healthy, and I had a young family, long road ahead, and kind of taking care of that family, and alcohol wasn't really fitting in with my exercise goals and a lot other lofty goals that I had. But it kind of scared me to think that I could go this prolonged period of time without a few beers, So um, it was about a year or so into my journey that I discovered athletic, and from there, I found everything there that I enjoyed about drinking a beer and not have to suffer the consequences, kind of thing, or the dreaded aftermath of the morning after. So, I from a personal standpoint, that I view it, people like me who still want to enjoy a beer, the variety is so important. You don't want that just that golden ale or the kind of the standards. I've found myself drinking more in non-alcoholic with sours and goes and stuff I wouldn't have tried back when I was drinking full strength beer. So yeah, the variety and the choices is super important.
And then what about for consumers in general, as far as, you can speak to, or that you're thinking or seeing being a part of athletic? I think the revolution here is like for someone seeking non-alcoholic beer to be able to have the craft beer experience, like to be able to walk into like a cool bottle shop in town and like have this whole range there. Like, what do you think a brand like Athletic is really bringing into people's lives with all these options?
Yeah, for sure. So consumers they're so hyper engaged in this niche. The non-alcoholic community. Um, uh, the market's kind of responding now to them and what they want. It's kind of we've grown from our kind of flagship beers into other limited time offerings and our pilot program and so on and so forth. So the challenge is always there, out in the market to get those kind of offerings out, but the demand is definitely there, and thankfully there's different ways that we can get to our customer. Um, one of them being a big one being direct to consumer. Um, but no matter what, now you're seeing kind of a lot of growth in the market, a lot of new breweries popping up, especially in the beer world, non-alcoholic wise. So no matter what you're kind of chasing as a consumer now, thankfully the choices are there, whether it's a true 0.0, maybe something low carb, or maybe like the hoppiest NA you could find, like our free wave, which we'll get into later. But um, I've been able to enjoy it from a personal standpoint, and as I said earlier, I've been drinking beers that I necessarily wouldn't have had before, so it's great.
Yeah. Why do you think now is really the time? I think Athletic really, as we mentioned, helped spark a lot of this sort of, this non alcoholic market really blowing open. But people are obviously really interested in this, and like the pursuit feels a lot more intense and enthusiastic now. Like, do you have any thoughts on why now is like such a big moment for alcohol free options?
Um, Yeah, I mean, it could be up for debate, and there's probably multiple answers for this. But I think even more recently with like COVID and staying home and quarantine and everything we kind of collectively went through with that, um, there might there might be this kind of higher state of self awareness or awakening, or as I mentioned before as well, like some kind of focus on your long term health. Maybe folks being locked up at home or whatever, they're in front of the mirror more. What is my alcohol take? Is it compatible with my goals? Things I mentioned. And I don't want to, like, don't get me wrong on that. I don't think anyone in the non-alcoholic beer world or industry is out to, get up on their soapbox and shout about the dangers of alcohol. But we're more so trying to find our place in the market, and we're finding our niche there. Um, but you're seeing more, a lot of consumers now just mixing in non-alcoholic to maybe balance out their alcohol intake. Um, or maybe they're doing that dry January, give their liver a break. Um, I just think, non-alcoholic in general, it's kind of in this right place, right time kind of moment in the grand scheme of things. And, more and more people are just, have more access to it and understand it a little bit better. And you're kind of seeing a little less of that kind of, the age old kind of reaction of like, what's the point of it? There's just more use cases, more access, and more awareness for sure. So it's in a good moment for sure.
That's such a good point with COVID too, because I feel like there were two groups of people that either started drinking a lot more during COVID or just stopped drinking altogether. And I was in the boat that stopped drinking because I'm very much a social drinker. And it's just kind of bizarre when something that is so prevalent in your life, living in New York, especially, um, that just stops all of a sudden, and then you do really start to question, like, do I need to have this as frequently as I do? And like, I don't think a lot of people really think about it, how much it affects their lifestyle, just because it's so normal. And I love that people are starting this like sober curious quest and really thinking like, well, can I continue to have a social lifestyle without as much alcohol too? So I think it's a great conversation starter for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that kind of actually leads perfectly into our next question because I think that maybe in the past too, there have been like some stereotypes around non-alcoholic beer. Some brands might come at it from like a weight loss perspective, which just feels off the mark and like really dilutes the message and feels like not as inclusive as it could be, or it gets, pigeonholed into like, oh, if you are pregnant and you want beer, it's just, it sort of has been so, again, just like stereotyped and pigeonholed in the past. So from athletic standpoint, like who is the athletic consumer? Like who is the non-alcoholic beer consumer? How is it really for everyone? How does it sort of fit into everyone's lifestyle?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I have a pregnant lady to thank for me discovering athletic. I was out at a restaurant one night, and she was ordering this non-alcoholic beer. It wasn't even on my radar, and I was just like, "Oh, what's that?" And my wife was like, "Oh, you should get one." So that's a story for another day. But yeah, I think to answer your question, we have a slogan here. It's without compromise, and that's open to interpretation as to what that means. But to me, it's like being able to have a great tasting beer without compromising in other aspects of your day to day, right? So um, some of the things you mentioned, everyone's on their own journey when it comes to weight loss or any other motivation like that. Um, we aren't out there to preach how a drink like athletic can help you or hinder you in that kind of journey. But to me, like you can have an athletic in the morning, which I've done plenty of times, before a run, after a run, in the afternoon, in the evening, and just still go out, still go on about my day, go drive, go do whatever, like nobody's business. So um, athletic to me, and other non-alcoholic beer and drinks and everything, they've always been this additive to my daily routine, kind of like your coffee in the morning or whatever it is. Um, and then, in terms of the consumer and the demographic, it runs the gamut. Um, I've seen top level athletes drinking our beer, as their personal choice or sometimes even as a recovery drink. Um, so, the demographic of who drinks our beer, for whatever reason, it's definitely very vast and really, pretty varied.
Awesome. So another sort of element of that lifestyle, and like we were saying before, with being able to really engage in the sort of craft beer world, even without alcohol. I think it's really cool that Athletic actually has a tap room, right, where people can go get that tap room experience. So why was that was that sort of always part of the plan? Was it always like we want to have a space, and like why was that important, and what does that sort of bring to the athletic brand?
Yeah, absolutely. We're really proud of our tap room in Stratford, Connecticut, which was our first brewery, and we believe it was the first tap room in the nation that was like exclusive non-alcoholic beer. Um, so we do our curbside pickups out of there. It's a tap room. We do events. People come from far and wide. We have six rotating draft lines, so people can come in. We get flights and take part in all the events that we do. And we've literally had, as I said, people come from all over Chicago. I had someone drive from Georgia. It was pretty crazy how the lengths people will come to get their non-alcoholic craft, and it just really humbles us and blows us away. So it's a really nice thing to have. I'll mention later, but we're building our third brewery now. Our second is in San Diego, and our third brewery is coming up in Milford, and we're in the planning stages of our tap room there. Um, it's just that face to face that you get. Like there's many facets to our business, but that's the one where it's like we really get to meet our customer kind of head on and interact with them, and the real true feedback usually comes from there, and it's just a really important element to have like in the community and part of a big part of our business. So we also run our pilot program out of there, which is like a small batch pilots. We've done that over the years, and some of those pilots, we test kind of locally, and some of them go on to, bigger and brighter things, being, coming into our rotation more as well. So it's another good use case for the tap room for sure.
I love that that also like helps break the stigma of like this truly is beer and a brewery and you're not missing out on that brewery experience either. And it's not just like this is just a non-alcoholic option and that's it. It's like you're getting the whole brewery aspect, the quality, the length of the flavors like Courtney had talked about earlier. I just think that was so smart to bring together that community too and just continue to break down the stigma.
Oh, for sure. It gets just as rowdy in there as any other brewery. I'll tell you that much.
I'm sure. We actually, out by me, we have a kombucha, like not hard kombucha, but just like a regular kombucha tap room. And it's exactly the same. Like it is the exact same atmosphere, rowdiness. And so I can definitely picture that well.
I love that. And
For
speaking
sure.
of that, I know, Athletic does events too. Like I've read about the Oktoberfest, and now that's definitely on my list to get to and experience. And I think that again, like speaking to all of that, like breaking down the sort of stigma, I think that's really important and really cool that you're like, yeah, you can do Oktoberfest without consuming alcohol. I mean, is there anything you want to talk about with athletics events or Oktoberfest in particular, like sort of how those play out?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Oktoberfest is a really fun one. I think we done our third one last October. Well, it might have been the last week of September, but it's a really fun event. We put it on at the tap room every year. Um, it coincides with our release of our Oktoberfest, and yeah, we have live music, amazing German food, and yeah, it's just incredibly fun. We get large numbers. We got hampered a little bit in 2020, I think, with COVID, but historically, it's just been a really fun event. Um, Another really cool one that I was personally involved with and organizing, which I probably going to do again this year, was the non-alcoholic beer mile. So that speaks for itself. It's 4 laps around a track, and you chug a beer on each lap. Um, so there's the regular version, the beer mile, which is actually a pretty competitive, like global event. Believe it or not, they have it the World Championships in England, I believe, every year.
My God.
So when I was planning this event, it all kind of landed in my lap. We happened to have on our roster of ambassadors the number one, actually the American record holder in the beer mile. His name is uh, Chris Robertson. and his buddy is Corey Belmore, who's the number one records holder in the beer mile, and he ran like a 4 minute 10, 4 minute 12, something like that mile while chugging four beers, which blows my mind.
Oh,
But
that's great.
That's just a slap in the face to everybody
Yeah.
else, honestly. You're just bragging
Yeah.
at that point.
Well, I'm like, what's the chances? So I was like, would you guys be interested in coming? So, long story short, they came out to Connecticut. We put on this event. Hoka was involved. It turned out to be, something that we were going to do for fun with like 5 or 10 people. We had 50, 60 runners. We had all these heats, and like, we, we used our cerveza, which goes down really easy. I ran it. It's hard. It's not easy. Like after even that first chug and you run, it's like, yeah, it's pretty rough. It took me 9 minutes or something, but that's a really fun event. We're going to be doing some virtual NA beer miles this year and really try to spruce it up and do another kind of in person later on in the year too. So if you're in, let me know.
That's so fun.
I'm very intrigued. I've never lost fantasy football, but that's always our the loser has to do the beer mile. So I think maybe we could get some other people interested.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. I think it's time to start getting toward the beer itself, very excitingly. So before we actually get into some tastings here, um, what can you tell us? I think some people are a little, I don't know, confused or just don't understand as much about, just the actual science of brewing a non-alcoholic beer. Is there just like anything you can share about the brewing process or how that all comes together?
Yeah. Full disclaimer, I'm not a brewer, but I've definitely learned a lot more about beer and brewing in the last 3 years. There's many kind of different methods of brewing non-alcoholic out there. Vacuum distillation, I believe, is one. Reverse osmosis. I think there's a couple others. Um, as far as ABC, I choose kind of like for the most part to remain ignorant about our particular process, but more so enjoy the end product. But our process is really very similar to normal beer. Um, it undergoes like a full fermentation, um, but they closely monitor like certain variables along the way in the process, things like temperature and things like that, and they maintain like a low level of alcohol. So we're unique in that sense, in that nothing's being removed. I think that really shows up in the kind of end product or the flavor in our beers for sure.
And how has sort of the brainstorming process for the individual styles? So I wasn't sure. Was Run Wild the very first athletic brew?
Yeah, Upside Down, which is the Golden Ale, and One Wild, they were our first brews, and still in many people's favorites here at Athletics. So definitely my first love. It was the first NA that I had, Run Wild. Uh, yeah, probably the first one I ever tasted besides like a O'Doul's or Caliber or something, maybe years earlier, like a sip of that to see what it was like. But um, yeah, Run Wild was I believe first with Upside Down.
Okay. I'm just curious if there's anything that you can sort of share about the brainstorming process behind the different styles, like why, like we're about to get into some of the different options here, but what's sort of guided, we want to explore doing this style without alcohol. Like how has the portfolio sort of grown and what has that like concepting process been?
From my understanding, Bill and John, they spent in the beginning. They spent like almost a year, like brewing batch after batch, trying to perfect Run Wild and Upside Down. Um, I believe, don't quote me, but they were in a basement and like homebrew type stuff. And like, God bless them, because if I was in a basement trapped with someone for that long brewing, bad batch after bad batch, I'd probably be going for the other person's throat. But it's really, a testament to both of them. Um, I've heard that story, and they really faced some big challenges, but they persisted with that and stayed true to their vision and nailed it. Um, and I know Run Wild in particular, we came out with this series last year in our pilot program where it was called Evolving Wilds. And it went back to those early days where um, they had some iteration of Run Wild and they were like, oh, that's interesting. And they put it up on the shelf and like, let's do that later. So I know that they, went to a lot of different places with their initial vision for Run Wild, and it ended up being this particular thing. Um, but yeah, brainstorming, like, our brewers are so talented and they're always coming up with new beers and stuff I've never even heard of. And, they really run it through that pilot program at the tap room and test its viability. And, to me, they're wizards. So I'm sure they have good ideas for, coming up coming up with certain varieties, and a lot of it is over my head, but I just get to enjoy it all, so I'm really happy.
Not a bad gig there.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get to some of the beers that we have. We have four ones in particular here, but I'll let you sort of where should we begin? Which beer should we start with?
um I would probably start with the Upside
Okay,
Down, the Golden Ale.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
pour that out. Here's the can for people watching this video.
Nice.
I'm also a huge fan of the artwork for the cans, that it just, again, going off of the breaking the stigma, it just looks like a brewery can, like a beer can, like I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I got some of the artwork behind me. Oh, I've got the big
Yeah,
thing.
you're like
Yeah.
double
Repping.
repping.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Upside Down, it's, your classic golden ale, refreshing, balanced, light bodied. I think it's only 50 calories. And it's crafted to remove gluten as well. So it's one of those for the gluten intolerant that they can enjoy as well. I always equate it to, I don't want to call it a lawnmower beer, but it is kind of my lawnmower beer. Like I'm out there doing my lawn and I'm sweating and I want a beer, and that's the one I go for. So
Yeah, this is like a really classic I know this is an overused word, but it just is very crushable.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I don't have one in front of me. I went with the free wave today, but we'll get to that one too. I would say next maybe Run Wild.
Okay, let's
We'll go up the hop
Yeah,
level,
okay.
maybe. That's what I was thinking.
So Run Wild is some more West Coast, yeah?
Yeah. Again, fairly balanced. Kind of more piney, citrusy type aroma and taste to it.
So is this your post run beer?
I guess so. I guess it would be. Yeah, it's always just my go to. Like, sometimes you get going down the rabbit hole with some of the unique beers that our brewers come out with, and like, there's so much choice, and like, and then I'll forget about Run Wild, like how good it is. I'm like, oh my god, like I've missed you. You know what I mean? So definitely great after a run. It's great everywhere. It's if you like IPAs, um, you know, it's really really nice.
It's that classic like that. And they're having a comeback in craft beer in the sort of trends anyway, the good old fashioned like West Coast IPA, because it's
Yeah,
not heavy. It's like this really crisp, beautiful concentration of the pininess and some citrus. And I mean, you take a sip of Rum Wild, and it's like really easy to see why people like really fell for this, because it's like, oh, I can't believe this doesn't have alcohol in it. You cannot tell the difference. You know you're getting a special craft West Coast style IPA.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And we've found like we've done obviously tons of samplings and handouts and stuff, and like you find people that don't typically like IPA that somehow end up loving ours. Like, sometimes, sometimes people are scared of, IPA went so far. Like it's like,
Definitely.
you know, this is just that, as you said, that session IPA, and it's, I don't know, there's something really unique about it. You're really tasting the hops, you know. I always wonder, like, um, you know, alcohol obviously like enhances flavors to some degree, but like, the I always think about like the lack of it, I guess. Like when it's non-existent, what does that mean? Like, are you truly tasting the hop? You know, these are the things you think about when you're crushing non-alcoholic IPAs.
It
So
does actually allow a little bit more introspection, I feel like, right? On the flavor and aroma. Like you can really concentrate on the beverage at hand.
right, yeah, I think so. Um, so from there, we'd definitely go free wave, which Run Wild being my first love. This, if I was on a desert island and someone, I could only have one crate of beer delivered to me on that desert island, a free wave would be full to the brim. Would be my choice. So,
What puts this one over the edge for you?
I always just loved like big hoppy IPAs. I'm sorry, like that was my thing, and I remember the first time I had this, and I was like, I really couldn't believe it. I was like, how did they manage to do this? Like, um, it was, all those, like, Treehouse would have been one of my favorites, or Trillium, or one of those like a few years
Hmm.
back. I don't know. I was just getting all of that again, and I was like, man, this is unbelievable. Um, so yeah, big, kind of bold, hoppy, hazy IPA. Um, I think the hops are Amarillo, Citra, and Mosaic.
Nice.
And I really should have it in a glass, but sorry, I hopped on with just a can. I was in a bit of a
Oh,
rush. So
I mean, it can be enjoyed in any format. I do think
Yeah.
I actually that's so interesting. That's like dead on. I think this Free Wave is a beer that if you have someone who's like Trillium Treehouse IPA obsessed and they're like, ugh, I could never drink a non-alcoholic beer, like this could change that tune. Like this is up to that task.
yeah, I think so. Definitely on some of the forums and stuff I'm on, people talk about it a lot, and yeah, it's one of our best sellers for sure.
And
I
it's fun
feel
to
like it's a
finish.
I feel like it's a misconception with non-alc beer too that there's nothing can be hoppy. And I, like you were saying, like I think some people think when you take the alcohol out that somehow the hops are gone too, and it's like far from the case. And you really do get to focus on those hop flavors. And I think for people that maybe don't focus on the like different types of hops and what that actually means. Like you always see it when you read the description, but you don't really know like the difference between the types of hops. And I think that's great that you can kind of work on your palate as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then the final one would be All Out, which is our extra dark. I've been enjoying this All Out over the winter, and I've always haven't had an affinity for it, but um, even more so recently. My dad called me, and he was like, "I'm loving All Out, All Out." He's like, "This is amazing." Now, my dad has he's an Irish born and bred. He's probably drank more Guinness than there is water in the Atlantic. You know, to hear him say that he done his first dry January, like, really blew me away. And he got all out in at his local watering hole and everything. So yeah, if that screw could be turned, any screw can be turned for sure. So I was really happy to hear that. So it made me just appreciate All Out a little bit more. But yeah, it's really full bodied, probably coffee, chocolate notes in there. Um, and yeah, just a really nice stout style for the fireplace and winter and whatever else you do over Christmas time. Cuddle up with a blanket, probably.
This one might be my favorite actually. I or maybe it's just like it's the newest one to me. I love it. I, by the way, over the weekend had this with, I happened to have a graham cracker, and the combination, that was like a boring old graham cracker has never been like such a good snack as having it with this beer. It was like very complimentary, flavor notes there.
Nice. I want to put a big scoop of vanilla ice cream in there. That's my next venture.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this one's
Yeah,
it's
I was the most curious about this one, about this flavor, because it's. I don't know why I thought it would be the hardest to replicate, and like just looking at the color looks like spot on.
Yep.
It does bridge a gap, I feel like, between a stout and also sort of having a big moment now are just like the dark lagers, because
Hmm.
it hits the stouts a little bit of the sweetness, but it's like definitely not too heavy and not too sweet, and it's like got that subtle sort of like roast to it, and it has like a clean finish. It's just like really well balanced.
Yeah, yeah, all that. I think it's 90 calories on that one, which is again like blows my mind. I can probably have three or four of those and still be okay.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so what kind of responses have you been noticing from consumers in terms of like, are people reaching for all out like as like a seasonal sort of indulgence? Is the free wave super like what sort of responses are you getting from people? Are you seeing people be really shocked when they try these at, at how good they are and everything?
Um, Usually it's like from my standpoint, I do a lot of like samples. It's always fun to get out and get in front of people and um yeah, like truthfully, there's always kind of that jaw drop moment of like, man, you know, I can't believe how good this tastes, and like for a non-alcoholic, that's great. But um, I just feel like we're kind of at this point where we're being judged against in the industry at least we're kind of being more. There's a bit of an even playing field now. Like last year, we won craft brewery of the year through Brewbound against alcoholic and non-alcoholic. So we're putting up a fight with the best of them, really, and kind of holding through that. Like we're kind of standing more shoulder to shoulder. But out in the market, yeah, there's the response has always been really positive from kind of the existing base, plus like any new consumers coming in. They um, uh, as I said before, really enjoy the choice, the variety, and the taste as well. So, yeah, really positive.
Cool. Um, so I think, one sort of big area of enjoying craft beer is like the food pairings and being able to like cook or bake with it. So are these things that people can still do with non-alcoholic beer? And if so, are there any, sort of tips or any go-to recommendations from you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen lots of recipes pop up in some of the non-alcoholic forums that I'm involved in, but yeah, you can absolutely do the same things with non-alcoholic as alcoholic versions. Beer battered fish and chips or anything of that nature. I do have a bunch of recipes that I could share with you. You could, I think they'll be linked in the description here on the podcast. We have some jackfruit carnitas tacos
Oh
that's
yeah.
paired with our cerveza. We have all out brownies, which are really, really nice. Um, yeah, that's something I could definitely indulge in more than once. But yeah, we have a whole variety. I can link to those, and your listeners can definitely check them out.
Yeah, we'll link to those, and people should definitely take pictures of what they make and tag Athletic and Taproom. Just saying.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's wrap things up here by looking to the future. Athletic has already done so much and really, really done so much for the non-alcoholic market, for the craft beer space. What It's like, like, how much further can you go? But I'm sure that you have big things in the works. So, do you want to just end by telling us what the future holds for Athletic Brewing Company?
Yeah. Um, on the ABC front, I'm excited. We have an amazing team. Collectively, we've crossed a lot of bridges so far and done great things. And I think there's many more ahead of us, and we'll meet those challenges that are upcoming. But um, recently we've started to expand internationally, so I'm really excited to see that entering markets where non-alcoholic, has maybe had a head start, which I didn't know, to be honest. I'm European, and I didn't know that. I'm Irish, and I didn't know that Ireland had a, you know, crazy non-alcoholic scene, but I know now. Germany, UK, places like that. Um, so the foundation, what we built, it's really positive, really strong. Really looking forward to next chapters. Um, we want to keep our heads down, make high quality non-alcoholic beer. That's definitely something we can control. Um, Anything outside of that, tech, distribution, marketing, sales, whatever it is, it's a challenge that we kind of will rise to. And as I said before as well, we're launching our third brewery in Milford. It's a massive facility, so trying to keep up with demand, which is a really good problem to have. But that third brewery is, another kind of huge milestone for us. So very exciting times ahead there. So um, yeah, that's exciting times ahead, onwards and upwards, as they say.
Awesome. Well, I know we're excited. So, yeah, this was really interesting and so fun to go through all the different options here. So, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through everything.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Courtney and Hannah. It's been fun. Cheers.
Cheers,
Cheers.
everyone. Looking forward to that beer mile next year.
Yeah, cheers, everyone. Bye.